The galaxy once belonged to the Erythrans. They were not like humans, bigger, stronger, and older than most civilizations. Their ships were massive, their weapons unmatched, and their technology seemed almost like magic. Every star system they touched fell under their rule. Planets trembled at their arrival, and entire species bowed to their will. To the Erythrans they were eternal. They were gods. On the palace world of Carice, built from crystal mountains that shone under the light of twin suns, High Chancellor Varath gazed at the stars through a vast holographic map. Each glowing point represented a world under Erythran control. Everything we see, everything we touch, belongs to us, he said quietly but with pride. His advisors and ministers nodded, fear and reverence in their eyes. The Erythrans had ruled for millennia. They had no equals. Varath turned to the galaxy's edge where darkness reigned, and for a moment he felt a strange chill. The outer rim was quiet, untouched by their fleets for centuries. But Varath dismissed it. Nothing beyond their reach could challenge them. Far away on a tiny blue planet that no one remembered, humans lived simple lives. They were weak, fragile, and slow. Their ships were tiny, their weapons primitive. They fought among themselves over small things. They had no idea what lay beyond their skies. To the Erythrans they were nothing, a brief curiosity, a species too small to matter. But humans had one thing the Erythrans did not understand: hope. It burned quietly inside them, unseen but unbreakable. It was a spark, a tiny ember that could grow into a flame that even the strongest could not extinguish. On Earth, a young human boy stared at the night sky. He did not know it yet, but the stars were about to change forever. Something was stirring in humanity, something that would challenge the mighty, something the galaxy had never seen before. Back on Carice, Varath prepared for another ceremonial inspection of his fleets. The grand hangars were filled with ships of every size, each bristling with weapons, each crewed by warriors trained to perfection. For the Erythrans, war was an art and they were the masters. Yet even as Varath walked among them, he could not shake the unease in his chest. Perhaps it was just fatigue, he thought. Perhaps it was the weight of millennia. The Erythrans believed themselves immortal, and in many ways they were. Their civilization had lasted longer than most stars had burned. Their monuments reached into space, their knowledge was unmatched, and their pride was absolute. They believed no force in the galaxy could challenge them, but pride can blind even the wisest. For now, the humans remained unaware of the Erythran empires. They went about their lives on scattered worlds, dreaming, learning, surviving. They were fragile, yes, and often foolish. They stumbled, they fought among themselves, they doubted, but they never gave up. They learned quickly, adapted, and endured. And that quiet resilience was something Varath's empire could never measure or predict. One night, as Varath stood atop the crystal spire of Carice's palace, he gazed at the stars beyond the controlled sectors. The galaxy seemed endless, and yet he felt it was complete. Every system was his. Every civilization bowed. Every corner of the galaxy was under Erythran rule. But in the distance, a faint, distant light flickered, unseen by most, unnoticed, small and fragile. It came from a human world, a single planet that would one day challenge everything the Erythrans believed. It was tiny, weak, insignificant, yet it was alive, and Varath, the greatest of the Erythran rulers, would not know it yet. But this spark, this fragile ember of humanity, would change the galaxy forever. The age of the Titans had begun. But so had the age of the humans. For centuries, humans had been ignored by the galaxy's rulers. To the Erythrans, they were insignificant, a minor curiosity that could not possibly threaten an empire that spanned 1,000 star systems. Their tiny ships were fragile, their weapons weak, and their civilizations primitive. Yet in their quiet worlds, humans were learning. They studied the stars, built their small fleets, and dreamed of reaching further than anyone had imagined. Captain Elena Marek commanded one of those small ships, the Resolute. It was not large nor powerful, but it carried something far stronger: human determination. Elena had grown up listening to stories of distant stars, imagining worlds no one had mapped. Now she and her crew were venturing into the unknown, far from human space, deep into the regions controlled by the Erythrans. As Resolute drifted through the black void, Elena looked out at the endless stars. "They think the galaxy belongs to them," she said softly to her first officer, Leon. They believe nothing can stop them, but they've never met humans like us. They've never seen what we're capable of. Leon nodded. We're small, but we're clever, and sometimes that is enough. The first encounters were cautious. Humans watched from the shadows, observing Erythran patrols, mapping their fleet movements, studying their weapons and tactics. Every moment of learning was a moment that would become a tool in the future. Humans understood one simple truth. Strength alone does not win wars. Strategy, courage, and unity do. Meanwhile, on Karas, High Chancellor Verath received reports of strange signals near the outer rim. Minor skirmishes, small ships appearing where none should exist. His advisors dismissed the reports as irrelevant. They are nothing, Chancellor, one minister said. A weak, primitive race cannot challenge the Erythrans. This is a distraction, nothing more. Verath frowned but remained calm. Perhaps, he said. But watch them. Keep an eye on them. Sometimes even the smallest spark can ignite a fire we cannot control. Unbeknownst to him, that spark already burned. Humans did not fear the Erythrans. They did not hesitate in the face of ships larger than entire cities, nor did they falter when faced with weapons that could destroy planets. Humans had something the mighty lacked, courage that refused to break and a mind that refused to bow. Elena's fleet began testing the limits of Erythran defenses. They launched small, precise raids on supply convoys and communication satellites. Each mission was a success, each strike teaching them more about their enemy. To the Erythrans, these were minor annoyances, but humans learned from every failure, adapted to every counterattack, and grew stronger with every encounter. One evening, as the crew of the Resolute gathered in the ship's small lounge, Elena spoke quietly, almost to herself. They have ruled for thousands of years. They believe themselves eternal. But no empire lasts forever, and no matter how mighty they are not invincible. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight her crew felt deep in their bones. Humanity had survived wars, famine, and endless hardships. They had endured what others thought impossible. And now, against the strongest beings the galaxy had ever known, they would endure again. Across the void, Verath stared at the flickering lights of distant patrols. He felt an unease he could not explain. There was something about this species, something small, fragile, and yet unyielding. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, a chill running through him that whispered of change. The humans were still few. Their ships were tiny. Their weapons were primitive, and yet the galaxy had begun to shift. A quiet resistance had begun, unnoticed by most, underestimated by all, and in that quiet resistance, the first seed of a human empire was taking root, a spark that would grow into a flame capable of challenging even the mighty Erythrans. The galaxy had been silent for centuries, but soon it would hear the first roar of humanity. The first strike was small, almost insignificant, but it changed everything. Captain Elena Merrick had been waiting for this moment for years. The Resolute and its small fleet had spent countless hours studying the Erythrans, mapping their patrols, observing their habits, learning the patterns of an empire that believed itself eternal. And now the time had come to act. Their target was a supply convoy, a cluster of massive Erythran cargo ships traveling between two outer systems. The convoy was heavily guarded, but not against a foe like the humans. Elena's plan was precise. Strike fast, hit hard, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. As the human ships moved into position, the crew felt a mix of fear and excitement. For some, it was their first real battle. For others, it was the culmination of everything they had trained for. Elena stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the glowing outlines of the convoy. "Remember," she said quietly, her voice steady, "we fight not because we are strong, but because we refuse to bow. We fight because we must survive. Nothing else matters." Then in a sudden flash, the attack began. Human ships darted from the shadows like predators, lasers slicing through shields, engines roaring, explosions lighting up the void. The convoy tried to respond, but human strategy was unpredictable. They struck from angles no one expected, moved faster than the Erythrans anticipated, and vanished before the enemy could recover. By the time the dust settled, several Erythran supply ships were destroyed, their precious cargo lost to the void. To the humans, it was a small victory, but to the Erythrans, it was unthinkable. Never before had a species so weak challenged them with such efficiency, such fearlessness. On Karis, Varath received the reports and felt a rare surge of anger. He clenched his massive hands around the edge of his council table. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is impossible. How can they strike us and vanish? They should not exist. They should not be capable of this," his advisors murmured uneasily. "Chancellor, they are humans, a minor species from the Outer Rim. Perhaps they are simply lucky." Varath's eyes narrowed. Luck had nothing to do with it. Something was different about these humans, something he could not understand. For the first time, he felt the icy fingers of fear brush against him. Meanwhile, Elena allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. She knew this was only the beginning. The humans were still small, their numbers limited, and their ships fragile. But their minds were sharp, their hearts unbreakable, and their determination unmatched. They would grow. They would learn. And they would not stop. The first strike echoed across the galaxy. Other human ships joined the fight, attacking minor Erythran outposts, cutting supply lines and freeing worlds that had long been under Erythran control. With each success, the humans learned more. With each battle, they grew stronger, more confident, and more dangerous. Varath paced the chambers of Karis's palace, fury and disbelief mingling in his thoughts. How could a species so small, so fragile, inflict such losses on the greatest empire in history? How could they continue to strike without fear, without hesitation? It was madness, and yet terrifyingly effective. Elena's fleet returned to the Outer Rim, battered but victorious. The crew celebrated quietly, knowing they had done what many thought impossible. The Erythrans had felt the first ripple of a storm they could not yet see. And in the shadows of the galaxy, humanity's spark began to grow. What had started as curiosity, as survival, was now becoming something else. A rebellion, a promise, a warning. The Erythrans had ruled the stars for millennia. They had believed themselves eternal. But humans had just shown the first proof that even the mightiest could bleed, and that no empire, no matter how vast, was untouchable. The age of the humans had begun, and it would not end until the stars themselves remembered their courage. The galaxy had changed. What began as small, isolated strikes by the humans had grown into a storm no one could ignore. Entire Erythran supply lines were collapsing. Worlds that had once bowed without question were beginning to resist. The Outer Rim, long ignored by the mighty empire, was now alive with human fleets striking, sabotaging, and inspiring rebellion. Captain Elena Merrick and the fleet of the Resolute had become legends in human space. They were not large in number, nor overwhelmingly powerful, but every human ship carried something far stronger than any Erythran weapon: courage, intelligence, and the will to fight for freedom. Each battle they won emboldened other humans. Every victory was a spark, igniting hope in planets that had lived under fear for centuries. Elena's fleet struck quickly and disappeared just as fast, leaving destruction in their wake and a clear message to the galaxy: humanity would not be ignored. Even minor Erythran outposts left lightly defended were no longer safe. Humans moved with precision and unity, using the enemy's own strategies against them. They learned quickly, adapted rapidly, and struck relentlessly. Meanwhile, High Chancellor Varath sat in his palace on Karis, his face hardened by worry. Reports arrived constantly: losses in the Outer Rim, minor fleets destroyed, communications severed. The Erythran Empire had never faced an enemy like this. They were strong, yes, but they were rigid. Every time Varath planned a counterattack, humans had already found a new way to strike. "They are relentless," an advisor said nervously. "They are small, but they do not fear us." Varath's eyes narrowed. "Fear?" he whispered. "Do they think they can survive against us? Do they think courage is enough?" But deep in his chest, a seed of doubt had begun to grow. Humans were not just fighting. They were learning, evolving, and adapting. And for the first time, Varath realized that his empire's greatest flaw was not strength, but arrogance. Across the galaxy, entire planets joined the humans' cause. They provided intelligence, ships, and supplies. The Erythrans had ruled through fear for millennia, but humans inspired something they had never seen before: hope. It was a strange, dangerous power, invisible yet unstoppable. On one small planet, a human pilot named Rena whispered to her crewmates as they prepared for a mission: We are small, she said, but they will never break our spirit. Every strike, every world we save, they will remember our courage long after we are gone. Elena watched from her command deck as fleets moved across the map like chess pieces. She knew the Erythrans were mighty, but she also knew their strength came from fear and pride. Humans had neither. They had ingenuity, teamwork, and a refusal to surrender, and that, she knew, was more dangerous than any weapon. As battles raged, Verath's confidence began to crumble. For centuries, the galaxy had obeyed the Erythrans without question. But now fear was turning to panic. Worlds once loyal were in open rebellion. Fleets that had never lost were shattered in unexpected strikes. And in every corner of the galaxy, whispers grew. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was unstoppable. Elena's fleet returned to a hidden base after another successful campaign. Exhausted but unbroken, the crew celebrated quietly. They had done what no one thought possible. They had challenged the greatest empire in the galaxy and won. But Elena knew this was only the beginning. The Erythrans would retaliate. Their empire was vast and their anger would be terrible. Yet she smiled quietly to herself. "Let them come," she whispered. "They will see what we can do. They will see that the smallest spark can burn down the mightiest empire." The war had begun. The galaxy had felt the first tremors of change, and soon it would shake completely. Humanity was no longer a flicker in the darkness. They were a storm rising across the stars, unstoppable, fearless, and unyielding, and the Erythrans, the so-called rulers of the galaxy, were starting to understand a terrible truth. Their empire, vast and eternal as it seemed, was not untouchable. The day the humans arrived at Caris, the Erythran capital, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. For millennia, Caris had been untouchable, a world of crystal spires, immense fortresses, and fleets that could crush any enemy without effort. But today, humans had come, and nothing would ever be the same. Captain Elena Marek led the fleet, her eyes fixed on the glittering palace world below. The Erythrans had prepared for war, but Elena knew their pride would be their downfall. They relied on fear and strength, but humans had cunning, adaptability, and the courage to defy impossible odds. "Stay sharp," Elena said to her crew. "This is the fight that will decide the future of the galaxy. Remember why we fight. Remember who we are. We are not gods, but we will not bow." The first volleys of battle lit the sky as human ships darted through Erythran defenses. Massive Erythran cruisers unleashed waves of weapons, but humans struck with speed and precision. Where the Erythrans expected a frontal assault, humans appeared from the flanks, attacking supply lines and command stations. Each strike was deliberate, calculated, and devastating. Inside the palace, High Chancellor Verath watched in disbelief. Holographic displays showed explosions across his fleets, entire sectors under human control in moments. "Impossible," he roared. "They cannot, no species could." But the humans were unstoppable. They did not fight like the Erythrans expected. They used their weakness as strength, their small numbers to strike unpredictably. And for the first time, Verath felt something he had never experienced in his long life: fear. Elena's landing teams stormed the crystal spires. Humans fought not for conquest, but for survival, for freedom, and for the countless worlds the Erythrans had oppressed. Each corridor of the palace became a battlefield, every hallway a test of skill and courage. Erythran warriors were strong, but humans were relentless. They adapted, learned, and pushed forward, refusing to retreat. In the heart of the palace, Verath finally confronted Elena. His massive frame towered over her, his voice booming with anger and disbelief. "You dare defy the rulers of the galaxy? You dare stand before me, a mortal against a god?" Elena stood firm, her eyes steady, unwavering. "You ruled through fear. You thought the galaxy belonged to you, but fear is not strength. Pride is not power, and no empire is eternal." For a moment, Verath could only stare. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. All his centuries of rule, all his victories, all his legacy, it could end here in the hands of humans who had once seemed insignificant. And then the palace shook. Explosions from above and below fractured the crystal towers. The human fleet had destroyed key power nodes, sending Caris into chaos. Verath's armies faltered. The invincible Erythran Empire was crumbling around him. Elena stepped closer, her voice calm but fierce. "It ends today. Not because we are stronger than you. Not because we are gods, but because we refuse to stop, refuse to bow, and refuse to let the weak suffer under tyranny any longer." With a final determined push, the humans seized control of the palace. Fereth fell, the last symbol of Erythran dominance extinguished. The empire that had ruled the stars for millennia was gone. Karis burned, not just in fire, but in the collapse of arrogance and pride. Outside, the human fleet hovered over the city world, silent, victorious, yet solemn. They had won, but the victory was not without cost. Many had fallen, brave souls who had carried humanity's hope into the heart of the enemy. Elena looked at the stars above and whispered, "We have survived, and now we rise." The fall of Karis marked the beginning of a new age. Humanity was no longer the fragile, overlooked species of the Outer Rim. They were a force that could not be ignored, a spark that could ignite the galaxy. And in the silence that followed, the stars themselves seemed to hum with the promise of a future shaped not by fear, but by courage. After the fall of Karis, the galaxy was quiet, but it was a heavy, tense quiet. The Erythran Empire, once feared and unstoppable, had crumbled in the face of humanity's courage and determination. Across the stars, planets that had been oppressed for millennia began to rebuild. The fleets that had once patrolled the Outer Rim in absolute authority were gone, destroyed or scattered, leaving a void that humans began to fill. Captain Elena Marik stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the vast expanse of space. The victory was complete, yet it was not triumphant in the way one might expect. Thousands of brave human lives had been lost to bring down an empire, and every loss weighed on her heart. "We won," she said softly to her first officer, Leon, "but victory comes with a cost. We must honor those who fell, and we must never forget why we fight." Leon nodded. "The galaxy will remember, Captain. We are small, but we are strong. We have shown the stars that even the weakest can rise." In the years that followed, humanity did not seek to rule the remnants of the Erythran Empire. They did not conquer worlds or enslave populations. Instead, they offered protection, guidance, and hope. Human fleets became messengers of peace, explorers, and guardians. They rebuilt infrastructure, helped oppressed species regain freedom, and shared knowledge wherever it was needed. The Erythrans who survived fled to the edges of the galaxy, carrying with them the weight of defeat and shame. Their legacies, once celebrated in every star system, were erased. Monuments to their arrogance crumbled, and their names were whispered only as warnings. A tale of what happens when power is used for fear and pride rather than justice. On a small, liberated planet, human children played under the light of alien suns, unaware of the battles that had brought them peace. They had inherited a galaxy free from tyranny, a galaxy full of possibilities. Their laughter was the sound of a future unbroken, a reminder that humanity's strength was not in weapons but in courage, unity, and hope. Elena walked among the ruins of Karis one last time before leaving the planet. She knelt beside a crater where many humans had given their lives, placing her hand on the cold crystal. "We remember you," she whispered. "Your courage will guide us forever." Above her, the stars seemed brighter, as if reflecting the resilience of the species that had dared to defy the gods. Messages were left throughout the galaxy on the ruins of Erythran outposts. Humans wrote words of warning and wisdom. "Do not let pride blind you. Do not let fear rule your decisions. Strength is meaningless without courage, and power is empty without heart." These messages became symbols of humanity's legacy, lessons not just for the defeated Erythrans, but for any species who might one day rise to dominance. Despite the calm that followed, humans remained vigilant. They had learned that the galaxy was unpredictable and that power could be fleeting. Their fleets were ever ready, not to conquer but to protect. Humanity had survived, yes, but more than that, they had proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire that could consume empires. Elena gazed at the horizon, thinking of the friends and comrades who had fallen. Her heart ached with grief, but it also soared with pride. Humanity had faced the impossible and had prevailed. They had taken the first step in rewriting the galaxy's story. As the Resolute lifted off from Karis, heading for new worlds, Elena whispered to the stars, "We are fragile, we are small, but we will endure, and we will rise again no matter what the galaxy throws at us." The age of humans had truly begun, and across the silent, liberated stars, their courage shone brighter than any weapon, stronger than any empire, and more lasting than the memory of the Erythrans themselves. Centuries had passed since the fall of Karis. The Erythran Empire, once feared across 1,000 star systems, was now a memory, a shadow of arrogance erased by humanity's courage. Their fleets had long vanished into the void, their monuments crumbled, and their names remembered only in cautionary tales. Yet humanity thrived, not as rulers but as explorers, protectors, and pioneers. Captain Elena Marek's name had become legend, whispered across the galaxy as the leader who had dared to challenge gods and survive. Statues and memorials honored the humans who had given everything, but the greatest tribute was not in monuments, it was in the lives they saved, the worlds they restored, and the hope they spread. Elena stood on the bridge of the starship Aurora, gazing out at the endless stars. Many humans had ventured beyond their home systems, exploring worlds no one had ever touched. Entire civilizations that had been oppressed for centuries now thrived, guided by humanity's courage and wisdom. And yet, even in peace, Elena knew vigilance was necessary. The galaxy was vast and dangers remained. "We are small," she said softly to her first officer Leon, who stood beside her. "But small does not mean powerless. We have no desire for conquest, no thirst for domination. But when necessary, we will rise, and the galaxy will remember." Leon nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Humanity's greatest strength was not technology, nor numbers, nor even courage alone. It was the heart that refused to surrender, the mind that adapted, and the spirit that inspired. Across countless worlds, humans had taught the same lesson. Even the weakest, when united and determined, could defy the mightiest. In the former territories of the Erythrans, humans left messages carved into ruined monuments, words of warning and wisdom. Do not let fear rule you. Do not let pride blind you. True strength is in courage, and true power lies in the heart. These words were read by countless species, inspiring them to rise, to resist, and to never forget the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. On one small planet, children played under alien suns, unaware of the battles that had shaped their world. Yet in every smile, in every laugh, the legacy of humanity lived on. Humanity had fought not for glory, but for survival, for freedom, and for the promise that no being, no matter how small, should live in fear of tyranny. Elena thought of those who had fallen, the countless brave souls who had given their lives to challenge the impossible. She closed her eyes and whispered their names to the stars. "Your courage carries us, your sacrifice shapes us, and through us your spirit lives forever." Even the Erythrans who had survived into the void felt the weight of their defeat. Their names and deeds, once celebrated, were forgotten. Humanity had not hunted them, nor destroyed them intentionally. They had simply moved forward, leaving the past behind. And in doing so, humans had taught a deeper lesson. True strength is not in vengeance, but in endurance, compassion, and courage. Elena turned from the viewport, gazing at the crew of the Aurora. Each face reflected determination, hope, and resilience. The galaxy had once doubted humanity. It had laughed at their weakness. But humanity had endured, risen, and reshaped the stars themselves. And across the galaxy, the whispers grew louder, spreading from one world to another. They ruled the stars, until humans showed them what it meant to be alive. The stars, once ruled by gods, now belonged to those who dared to dream, to fight, and to rise against impossible odds. Humanity had proven that no matter how small, how fragile, or how underestimated, the spark of courage could ignite a fire strong enough to change the galaxy. And in every corner of the cosmos, one truth was clear. Humans had survived, had risen, and would endure long after empires had fallen. They were not just a species, they were a legacy, a testament to what it truly meant to live, to fight, and to never bow. The galaxy belonged to the brave, and humanity had claimed it.